minute can open your eyes. One book can open your world. Knowledge gives you power. Read and rise higher. 9R Tree. Better life begins in a book.
Hello, I'm Sebastian. Welcome to 9R Tree's podcast. Today, I will summarize and review the book. Prequel. An American Fight Against Fascism is a vivid work of narrative nonfiction in which Rachel Maddow excavates a largely forgotten period when the United States faced an organized, well-funded push toward authoritarianism. Moving through the late 1930s into the Second World War, she traces how foreign autocrats, domestic extremists, and opportunistic politicians tried to bend democratic institutions to their aims. Radio demagogues, secret propaganda networks, and courtroom battles animate a story that feels at once historical and urgently current. Maddow blends archival discovery with investigative clarity, highlighting prosecutors, journalists, and everyday citizens who resisted schemes that targeted the press, elections, and the rule of law. Rather than a distant prelude, this prequel shows patterns that recur whenever democracy is stressed. The result is a page-turning account that doubles as a civic manual, revealing how fragile systems can be defended when facts are followed, laws are tested, and ordinary people choose to act. I will give you key takeaways from this book. Firstly, a covert propaganda pipeline to Congress. Maddow details a sophisticated influence operation that reached directly into the halls of Congress. At its center stands George Sylvester Viereck, a well-connected propagandist who cultivated isolationist lawmakers and drafted speeches that echoed the rhetoric of a foreign dictatorship. Those speeches were introduced into the Congressional Record and then mass-mailed under the franking privilege, laundering foreign talking points through an American institution with the imprimatur of officialdom. Figures such as Senator Ernest Lundeen, among others, feature in a narrative that shows how staffers, lobbyists, and public relations channels became conduits for disinformation. A 1940 plane crash that killed Lundeen turned into a pivotal investigative break, as law enforcement recovered documents that illuminated the scope of the scheme. Maddow explains mechanics as well as motives, showing how prestige, money, and ideological alignment created a feedback loop. The chapter functions as a case study in how autocrats exploit procedural loopholes and why transparency, ethics rules, and vigilant press coverage are essential safeguards. Secondly, the Great Sedition Trial and its collapse. At the height of the war, federal prosecutors brought an ambitious case in Washington, charging a diverse roster of far-right activists and propagandists with sedition. The proceeding, soon labeled the Great Sedition Trial, assembled defendants tied to pro-Nazi agitation, anti-Semitic networks, and calls to undermine the war effort. Maddow reconstructs the courtroom drama in granular detail. A sprawling indictment, tactical missteps, defense theatrics, and the sudden death of Judge Edward C. Eicher that contributed to a mistrial. She situates the legal theory within the era's statutory tools, including sedition and wartime speech laws, and she treats civil liberties concerns with nuance. The trial's collapse was not just a legal event, but a propaganda victory for extremists who claimed martyr status. Maddow shows how overreach, poor case management, and institutional rivalry undercut accountability, while also clarifying that not all defendants were mere speakers. Some had ties to concrete plans for sabotage and insubordination. Thirdly, media demagogues and the ecosystem of American fascism. Prequel maps the social and media infrastructure that amplified authoritarian ideas. Radio star Father Charles Coughlin mobilized millions with a brew of grievance, anti-Semitism, and conspiracism, spawning street-level groups like the Christian Front. Paramilitary outfits such as the Silver Shirts promoted uniformed spectacle and violent fantasies, while the German-American Bund staged mass rallies and youth camps modeled on European movements. Pamphleteers, small publishers, and sympathetic clergy created overlapping networks that pooled mailing lists, donors, and venues. Maddow shows how these actors exploited modern technology for the time-cheap radio sets, tabloid newspapers, and mass mailings to flood the zone with emotionally charged claims, then laundered the same narratives through friendly politicians. She avoids caricature, presenting organizers as skilled strategists who understood psychology, spectacle, and procedural rules. By illuminating how fringe propaganda migrated into mainstream debate, she offers a template for recognizing similar pipelines in the present and the countermeasures that can blunt them. Fourthly, inside the government response, DOJ, FBI, and O. John Rogge, Maddow follows the uneven federal response, focusing on Justice Department lawyers who pursued coordination between American extremists and Nazi operatives. Prosecutor O. John Rogge emerges as a central figure. After the war, he traveled to Germany, gathered captured archives, and drafted a report naming American politicians who had cooperated with foreign agents. His findings triggered political blowback, and a later attorney general curtailed his ability to publish, illustrating how accountability can be stifled by institutional caution and partisan pressure. The book also examines J. Edgar Hoover's FBI priorities, which often leaned toward anti-communist operations while treating some fascist threats as secondary, fueling interagency friction. Maddow explains the legal landscape, including the challenges of proving conspiracy, the limits of speech protections in wartime, and the perils of overbroad prosecutions. The portrait is neither cynical nor hagiographic. It shows professionals grappling with novel dangers, constrained resources, and an urgent need to act without breaking the constitutional order they were sworn to defend. Lastly, civic resistance and durable lessons for today. Beyond courts and committees, Prequel celebrates citizens who refuse to be bystanders. Community leaders, veterans, librarians, postal workers, and local reporters shared tips, preserved documents, and exposed front groups. In Los Angeles, attorney Leon Lewis organized a civilian intelligence ring that infiltrated violent cells and thwarted planned attacks on synagogues and defense plants. Maddow draws out the through lines that matter now. Authoritarians exploit grievance, flood information channels, and weaponize procedural gaps. Democracies answer with transparency, fact-based reporting, and organized civic pushback. She stresses practical habits that scale from kitchen table to Congress financial disclosure, ethics enforcement, media literacy, and alert voters who reward integrity. The lesson is sober, but hopeful. The United States has faced coordinated anti-democratic campaigns before, and they were beaten back not by magic, but by patient, lawful work carried out by prosecutors, jurors, editors, and neighbors who insisted that rules matter and that truth can be proved. In conclusion, this book is essential for readers of history and politics, journalists, teachers, lawyers, and any citizen who wants a usable past for defending democracy. Rachel Maddow combines gripping storytelling with original research to reveal how authoritarian movements target institutions, and how those institutions can fight back without losing their soul. You will come away with a map of vulnerabilities and a toolkit of responses grounded in real cases rather than slogans. Choose this book over generic overviews because it connects names, documents, and legal strategies into a coherent arc that explains both failure and success. It is not only a warning, but a manual for resilience. If you care about election integrity, media literacy, or the line between protected speech and criminal conspiracy, Prequel offers clarity you can act on. It earns its place on the shelf as both history and a guide to responsible citizenship. If you would like to support Rachel Maddow, you can buy the book through the Amazon link I've provided in the podcast description. After reading the book, please let me know what you think and share your thoughts. See you around.
1 minute can open your eyes. One book can open your world. Knowledge gives you power, read and rise higher. 9 or tree, better life begins.